Right, on the eve of the election, the ACT candidates make their final pitches to undecided voters.
I'm Dan Borscher at the National Museum. I'll be looking back at the campaign and getting analysis on how the ACT may look when all the results are in.
Also tonight, the AFP investigates the Commonwealth's $30 million purchase of land for the Western Sydney Airport. Donald Trump and Joe Biden answer voters' questions after ditching plans for a second presidential debate. And do or die for the Raiders as the Green Machine attempts to qualify for a second consecutive grand final. We meet a Canberra superfan. Good evening, Nada Gilmore with ABC News on this ACT election eve. I'll be back with the rest of the day's news later in the program, but now over to Dan Borscher at the National Museum for our special coverage of ACT Votes 2020.
Good evening, Nada. You join me here at one of Canberra's most iconic spots, Acton Peninsula, the home of the National Museum of Australia. Inside the museum's stunning entrance hall, final rehearsals are underway for tomorrow night's ABC election special. Less than 24 hours from now, the polls will be closed and the first results will be coming in. More on that later, but first, the major parties have made their final pitch to voters ahead of election day tomorrow. ACT Labor visited the light rail depot and the hot topic from their last election win 4 years ago, while opposition leader Alastair Coe voted before revisiting his promises one last time in a way that's become all too familiar during his campaign. Here's Isaac Naruzi.
One last push towards the finish line.
It's a choice between an experienced and progressive team or an inexperienced and conservative team led by my opponent, who's used this campaign more as an audition to be a stuntman.
It's a clear choice between the fresh vision of the Canberra Liberals or more of the old, tired, high-taxing, declining services of the Labor Greens coalition.
Chief Minister Andrew Barr made his final pitch to voters at the light rail depot in Mitchell, arguing his track record navigating Canberra through tough times is evidence he's the right man to drive the ACT forward.
And during this year of bushfires, of catastrophic hailstorms and of a global pandemic, we have led this territory well, with compassion and with strength of leadership.
Meanwhile, opposition leader Alastair Coe and his family exercised their democratic right before pulling out the props one last time.
Tomorrow all Canberrans have a choice to put their rates bill in the freezer for 4 years.
The ACT Greens leader pulled out his own climate-related document. Reducing emissions is the party's big sell. It's stacking up to be a close election, but if it comes down to the Greens again, their support is only going one way.
We have indicated we could not support the Liberal Party to form government. We don't think that they have brought the policies forward that Canberrans need.
Some Canberrans who voted today do think it's time for a change after 19 years of Labor.
I think it is time that there's a few changes made, and I just think with the rates in Canberra as well, that's probably something that really needs to be changed. They're just quite high.
I think there's always room for a change because I think when you've been in power for so long, there's a risk that you get complacent with what you're doing and you get a bit cocky.
Others are happy with the way things are.
Done a great job in terms of the virus and all the precautions.
Just one more day to make a choice. Isaac Naruzi, ABC News, Canberra.
A win for ACT Labor tomorrow would make it one of Australia's longest-serving governments, matching the second government of Sir Robert Menzies for longevity. Far from being a weakness, Labor wants voters to see its 19 years in office as a strength, asking Canberrans to trust an experienced government in a time of uncertainty. But if Labor wants to be judged on its record, that means being accountable for both the successes and the mistakes.
It's a brutal reality. Disasters make for excellent politics. For Andrew Barr and ACT Labor, 2020 has provided plenty.
This is an anxious time for many in Canberra and the broader region, and we don't know what the days ahead will hold for our city.
Through the summer's bushfires and the global pandemic that followed,
No trips to the coast, no trips to Sydney or Melbourne. Stay in Canberra, stay at your house.
the ACT government and its leadership were subjected to far greater scrutiny than usual. A grim political gift Labor is willing to exploit and highlight for voters.
They've seen two very practical examples of serious issues that put this city at significant risk, and they've seen how this government has responded to those.
Labor wants voters to decide that things are uncertain right now and they shouldn't roll the dice on a new government. But if the party is asking voters to judge it on its record, that means answering some more uncomfortable questions. One of Labor's core election pledges is to construct the $500 million Canberra hospital expansion.
We are investing in new and improved healthcare.
If that sounds familiar, it's because they made the same promise 4 years ago.
A significant investment in the future of the way that health services will be delivered here on the Canberra hospital site.
And construction was supposed to be well underway by now. A huge investment has been pledged in education, with new schools to be built and existing schools improved. Within that, there's funding to remove lead paint from Canberra's schools.
69 ACT public schools have hazardous material plans and have those materials in them.
Election campaigns aren't just about announcing shiny new things, they've also got to be about what you will do in government to renew infrastructure, to restore infrastructure, to maintain infrastructure.
90 new electric buses will run across Canberra under Labor, but they'll be running on a network recently overhauled for the third time in 2 years.
We've listened to community feedback and we've had thousands of pieces of feedback on the new network since it was introduced in April last year, and we think that these changes strike the right balance.
Labor wants Canberra's voters to trust the leaders they know, flaws and all. Tom Lowry, ABC News, Canberra.
While Andrew Barr has tried to show he's a safe pair of hands, Alastair Coe has painted the Labor government as tired, old and out of touch. His party has campaigned on cost of living pressures, arguing that after 19 years of Labor, the city has become unaffordable, pushing families over the border. But as they've tried to sell their economic plan, their campaign has been dogged by questions about how they'll pay for their big promises.
I want a city that brings out the best in you.
A Liberal government in the ACT, it was always going to be a tough task for Alastair Coe.
Do you believe in miracles?
Look, I think to be a Liberal in Canberra, you believe in miracles.
A fresh face in leadership after another failed campaign.
I was elected as leader, unopposed.
Alastair Coe was chosen as the man to bring the Liberals out of the political wilderness. After surviving a potential coup from party moderates a year ago.
Oh, look, you get disgruntled people. That's just the reality.
Mr Coe was starved of opportunity as his opponent took centre stage during bushfires, smoke, hail and COVID-19. But where he's lacked profile, he hasn't lacked confidence.
There is no doubt that the Canberra Liberals can win this election, and we can do so with a majority.
To get there, the party has pitched to families' hip pockets, coining what has become an all-too-familiar campaign catch cry.
The Canberra Liberals are committed to making the ACT the best place to live, work and raise a family.
The centrepiece of their cost of living campaign?
Only the Canberra Liberals will smash the cost of living, lower taxes and deliver better services.
A promise to freeze residential and commercial rates, turning to stunts to sell the message. The Liberals outlined ambitious health policies, including an even bigger expansion of the Canberra hospital. They've pledged to overhaul the school curriculum, improve a bungled bus network, cut the cost of car registration and plant 1 million trees in a decade. But as the spending promises piled up, so did the questions over his costings.
It doesn't add up. People know it doesn't add up.
The only explanation as to how they would pay for their big promises, a plan to lure more people to the city and grow the economy.
The Canberra Liberals are absolutely committed to doing everything we can to grow the pie here in the ACT.
While Andrew Barr has tried to show he has a safe pair of hands, Alistair Coe has described the Labor government as tired, old and out of touch. But in a global pandemic and recession, is there mood for change? And can a Conservative figure like Mr Coe lead a progressive city? He's brushed off criticism of his social leanings and is banking on the "it's time" factor, hoping the sentiment for change will turn the tide of recent political history. Tom Maddox, ABC News, Canberra.
So two very different campaigns with starkly contrasting policies. ACT political reporter Tom Lowry joins me now. Tom, election eve is always a nerve-wracking time for the political parties. What are you hearing from inside the campaigns?
Dan, I think Labor are fairly or quietly confident at least. They always are every time Canberrans go to the polls. They've won 5 straight elections after all, but don't be fooled, there'll still be plenty of nerves inside that campaign. They know just how close these elections are. The Liberals know that too. They've been telling that to their supporters for weeks, saying that every vote absolutely counts for them. But there is a certain amount of calm that comes with being the underdog. The pressures just aren't quite as high, but of course a loss tomorrow night would still be absolutely devastating.
So Tom, just who has run the better campaign?
Look, Dan, Labor runs a really professional outfit. They benefit a lot from incumbency. There are some really good campaign staff behind them. It's been a quiet, confident and sensible campaign from Labor. The Liberals really lifted after that election debate. Alistair Coe enjoyed being able to test his policies very publicly against Andrew Barr, and he gained plenty of confidence from it. But they've still been dogged by questions throughout this campaign about how they're going to pay for their promises. They've tried to ram home a very simple message. That's where these Boris Johnson-style stunts have come from, and we'll see what the voters have made of those tomorrow.
Yeah, we certainly will, Tom Lowry. Thank you for your insights. Tomorrow's election result could be known soon after polling closes, with a high number of Canberrans choosing to vote early. More than 200,000 Canberrans have already cast their ballot. That's around 66% of eligible voters. The ACT Electoral Commission expects about 70% of the electorate to have voted by the time early polling closes at 8 o'clock tonight. The vast majority of early voters did so electronically, and there's been so much said about the ACT leading the charge when it comes to this technology. So, the majority of votes have already been cast, and that means some results may be known very soon after the polls close tomorrow at 6 o'clock. ABC Canberra data journalist Marcus Mannheim has been following election trends, and he joins me now. So Marcus, you've been looking at all of the data. What are you seeing in amongst the numbers?
Well, I see a lot of uncertainty. I guess that's the case with every ACT election. And we don't really know what's going to happen tomorrow night. I think a lot of Canberrans don't quite realise how close Canberra or ACT elections are. But we can look at the last election and it gives us some hints. We know that we have really tight margins in 2 electorates in particular. That's Ginninderra, which covers the Belconnen region, and Murrumbidgee, which covers Woden, Western Creek and Molonglo valleys. The thing about those 2 areas is that they also have 2 members who are retiring. And past elections show us that when you have a retiring member, that tends to create a bit of an unpredictable scramble for votes. So I'll be looking at Ginninderra and Murrumbidgee tomorrow for surprises.
Well, given those variables, we know political parties don't like variables. So where have they been putting their energies?
If I were them, I would look tomorrow night first at Murrumbidgee again. I think the Liberals, if they want to govern the ACT, they have to pick up that 5th and final seat in Murrumbidgee, which is held by the Greens' Carolyn Lakuta. She's retiring. She only beat the Liberals by 800 votes. And there's no one running this time around that has the profile that she had. So it's completely up for grabs, that final seat in Murrumbidgee. Labor will want to grab it too. The Greens will want to hold on to it, but I think, though, there is a chance that Labor could still hold on to power if they lose that seat, so long as they do relatively well elsewhere. Having said all of that, this is an ACT election. It's going to be uncertain, and the big surprise tomorrow night could actually end up being somewhere else.
Well, that's the only certainty when it comes to politics. Marcus Mannheim, appreciate your analysis. And we'll be bringing you all the results as they come in live from the National Museum here in Acton. As you can see, finishing touches are being put on our set here at the museum for tomorrow night's election special. Greg Jennett, Anthony Green and Adam Shirley will be in the Gandal Atrium with a host of guests and pundits, and our reporters will be out and about across Canberra bringing you all the reaction. That's here on ABC TV from 5:30 tomorrow evening. Until then, that's all from me, Dan Borscher at the National Museum. Now, with the rest of the day's news, back in the studio, here's Nada Gilmore.